He told his brother I was the safe choice. Not the one he wanted, the safe one. I heard it through a door I hadn't meant to stand behind at a dinner party in my own home, holding a bottle of Pinot Noir I'd been planning to open to celebrate our mortgage approval. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in my own hallway with the wine getting warm in my hand. My name is Lydia. I'm 37 years old. I'm a registered nurse at a hospital in Ottawa, and for 3 years I believed I was building something real with a man named Fletcher. We met at a friend's birthday in Westboro. He was funny and easy to talk to, the kind of person who remembers what you said 2 conversations ago and brings it up naturally, not to impress you, just because he was actually listening. I thought that was rare. I still think it's rare. I was right about that part, at least. We dated for about 8 months before he asked me to move in. I'd been renting a 2-bedroom in Centertown, and my lease was up anyway, so the timing felt right. His place was bigger. We'd talked about the future. It seemed like the natural next step. Looking back, I can see the things I glossed over because I wanted them to mean something different than what they were. He was a little evasive about money sometimes. Not secretive exactly, just vague in a way that I told myself was just his personality. Some people don't like talking about finances. I work in healthcare. I know what burnout looks like. I gave him room I didn't need to give. By year 2, we were serious enough that we started talking about buying. Housing in Ottawa wasn't getting any cheaper, and we'd been living together long enough that it felt like the right move. Fletcher had some savings. I had more. I'd been careful since my mid-20s, maxed out my RRSP every year, put money into a TFSA, lived below my means when my friends were splurging. My mother always said, never let anyone else hold your financial future, and I'd taken that seriously. Or I thought I had. We agreed to split the down payment. His portion was smaller, and we acknowledged that openly. The plan was that the mortgage payments would come proportionally from both of us, and we'd revisit the equity split if we ever sold. It wasn't a formal agreement. We didn't get a cohabitation agreement drawn up. My friend Petra had been telling me for 6 months that I needed one, and I kept saying, yes, I know. We'll get to it. We didn't get to it. The house we bought was a semi-detached in Hintonburg, older but solid, good bones, nice street. We closed in early April. The day we got the keys, I cried in the kitchen because I was so happy. Fletcher put his arms around me and said, we'd built this together. I remember exactly how he said it. We built this together, Lydia. I held on to that for longer than I should have. The dinner party was in July, 3 months after we moved in. I'd invited a few friends, and Fletcher had invited his brother, Raymond, and Raymond's wife, Simonsund. It was supposed to be a relaxed evening. I'd made a lamb shoulder that had been braising. Since noon, there was good wine, the backyard was warm, and the garden was just starting to come in. I was genuinely happy. I want to be clear about that, because everything that came after has a way of making the before feel false, and it wasn't. I was actually happy that night, at least until I wasn't. I'd gone inside to grab another bottle. Our kitchen is at the back of the house, and the dining room window opens onto the backyard, where everyone was sitting. I could hear the conversation from inside, muffled but clear enough. Fletcher and Raymond had apparently stepped away from the table. I could hear them near the side gate, just the 2 of them. Fletcher's voice, then Raymond's. I wasn't eavesdropping. I want to say that because it matters to me. I wasn't creeping around my own house listening at windows. I just went to get the wine, but then I heard my name, and then I stopped moving. Fletcher was laughing. Not a big laugh, that low, easy laugh he does when he's relaxed and not performing for anyone. He said something I didn't catch at first, and then Raymond said, "So you're happy then?" And Fletcher said, "I mean, yeah. She's steady, you know? She makes good money, she's not dramatic, she's got her whole thing sorted. It's easy." Raymond laughed. "Easy how?" And Fletcher said, "She's been wanting this for a while, a house, the whole thing." She was ready. I figured, why fight it? There was a pause. Then Raymond said, "But do you actually?" And Fletcher cut him off. "Don't make it weird," he said. "It's good. It works." I stood in my own kitchen with my hand on a bottle of Pinot Noir, and I understood what I'd just heard. She was ready. I figured, why fight it? Not, "I love her and I want this life." Not, "She's the person I want to grow old with." She was ready. I figured, why fight it? I was convenient. I was stable, and I wasn't dramatic, and I made good money, and I had my whole thing sorted, and he'd looked at all of that and decided it was easier to step into my life than to build his own. I put the wine down on the counter. I stood very still for what felt like a long time. Then I heard chairs scraping and people coming back inside, and I picked the bottle back up and walked out like nothing had happened. Because that night, nothing had. Not yet. I slept about 2 hours. Fletcher fell asleep quickly, which I had always taken as a sign of a clear conscience. I lay beside him in the dark and replayed what I'd heard, trying to find the version of it that meant something different. I'm good at problem solving. I work night shifts. I can hold 2 contradictory ideas at once and stay functional. But there was no version of "she was ready." I figured, why fight it? That meant what I needed it to mean. By 4 a.m, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed information first. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I said a single word. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen with my laptop. The first thing I looked at was our joint account. Fletcher and I had one shared account for household expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries. We each kept our own personal accounts. I had full online access to the joint statements, which I hadn't looked at carefully in a while because I'd been busy and I trusted him. And honestly, I thought we were on the same page. I wasn't on the same page. Going back through the last 4 months, I started to see a pattern I'd missed because I wasn't looking for it. Transfers out of the joint account that were labeled things like household supplies or maintenance or just transfer. Small amounts, irregular, but they added up. Over 4 months, just over $3,000. I cross-referenced against receipts I could find, against anything that might explain it. Some of it I could account for. A few $100s I couldn't. $3,000 is not a fortune. But it's also not nothing. And it was the principle of the thing. The quiet, careful way it had been done. The labels that were vague enough to be plausible, but specific enough to seem intentional. I started keeping a record. I opened a spreadsheet and went back through every joint statement I could access, which was 14 months. I documented every transaction I couldn't fully explain. Then I looked at his profile on social media, not because I thought I'd find anything dramatic, but because I was paying attention to everything now. I looked at who he'd been talking to, what events he'd attended without mentioning, what details didn't match the timeline he'd given me. I'm not going to go into all of it here. Some of it is still painful to think about clearly. But what I found was a picture of someone who had been coasting, in the relationship, in his finances, in his plans. He owed money I didn't know about. He'd borrowed from a friend of his named Derek, not a small amount, and the repayment had apparently been coming, in part, from our joint account. He'd been using our shared money to cover a debt he'd never told me existed. I sat at the kitchen table until the sky got light. Then I closed my laptop and went back to bed. Here's what I want to say to anyone who has ever been in a moment like that one. The grief and the anger don't arrive at the same time. The anger comes first, and it is clean and useful. It tells you what to do. The grief comes later, when you're somewhere ordinary, picking up your dry cleaning, sitting in the parking lot at work, and it hits you like weather, sudden and from the wrong direction. In those weeks after the dinner party, I was running on anger, and I am grateful for it. I called my friend Petra the next morning while Fletcher was at work. Petra is a family lawyer in Canada. She's been telling me for years that she hopes I never need her professionally. "You need me professionally," I said when she picked up, and she went very quiet and then said, "Tell me everything." I told her everything. She asked me a lot of questions. Was my name on the title? Yes, both of us. Was the down payment documented? Yes, through the lawyer who handled the sale. Did we have a cohabitation agreement? No. She sighed at that the way she'd been sighing about it since before we bought the house. "Okay," she said. "Here's where you are. You're co-owners. Your down payment contribution is documented through the transaction. The joint account transfers are potentially recoverable depending on what they were used for. You're not in a catastrophic position. But you need to move carefully." I wrote down everything she said. Then I asked her the question I'd been turning over since 4 a.m. "If I end this," I said, "what do I need to do first?" She told me. I spent the next 3 weeks doing things quietly. I opened a new personal account at a different bank and redirected my direct deposit there. I moved my savings into my TFSA. I spoke to my bank about removing myself from automatic contributions to the joint account. Not closing it, just stopping the flow of my money into it. I asked Petra to draw up a letter documenting my down payment contribution and the proportional equity I held in the property, and she sent it to a notary and had it witnessed and filed. I gathered the spreadsheet I'd made of the unexplained transactions, and I had a conversation with a financial advisor at my credit union about what my options looked like. I didn't tell Fletcher any of this. I want to be honest. I was calm. Frighteningly calm, according to Petra. I think part of it was that I'd already done my reviewing in the weeks since the dinner party. In the car on the way to work, in the staff bathroom, at the end of a 12-hour shift, once on the phone, with my mother who just listened and didn't say anything unhelpful, which is the best gift she has ever given me. My mother, when I told her, said only, "What do you need from me?" I said, "Nothing right now. I just needed to say it out loud." She said, "Okay, I'm here." That was enough. That was everything, actually. Fletcher, during all of this, was normal. That was the strangest part. He was exactly the same as he'd always been. He made dinner on the nights he got home first. He asked about my shifts. He suggested weekend plans. Either he had no idea what I now knew, or he was a better actor than I'd ever given him credit for. Both possibilities told me something. I looked at him across the dinner table sometimes and thought, you have no idea who you've been living with. Not in a threatening way. Just in the quiet way you realize that someone has been seeing a version of you that isn't the full picture. The moment I chose to say something wasn't planned. Or rather, the timing wasn't planned. I'd made the decision, I'd put the steps in place, I'd talked to Petra and to my mother and to my financial advisor. Everything I could do quietly had been done. I just needed to find the right moment. It came on a Saturday morning in August. Fletcher was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee and his phone, which is his standard Saturday morning. I poured my own coffee and I sat down across from him and I said, "I need to talk to you about something." He looked up and he smiled a little easy, like maybe I was going to suggest a renovation or a trip. "What's up?" he said. I said, "I know about the money." He didn't say anything right away. He put his phone down. Something shifted in his face. Not guilt, exactly. More like the look of someone recalibrating. "What money?" he said. "The transfers from our joint account," I said. "The ones that paid back Derek." He was quiet. Then, "Lydia, I'm not asking you to explain it," I said. "I'm telling you I found it. And I'm telling you that I've already spoken to a lawyer and a financial advisor about where I stand. Everything is documented." He started to say something, and I held up my hand. "I also need you to know," I said, "that I heard your conversation with Raymond at the dinner party in July. That landed differently. I watched it land. "What did you?" He started. "I was in the kitchen," I said. "I went to get the wine. You were at the side gate. You told him I was the easy choice. That I'd been ready, and you figured why fight it." He opened his mouth and closed it again. "I don't need you to explain that either," I said. "I understand what it meant. I just want you to know that I heard it, and that I have not spent every day since then performing normal so you wouldn't see what I was doing." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "That's not what I meant." "It's what you said," I said, "and the money confirms the rest." The conversation that followed was long, and I'm not going to recreate all of it here. He apologized. He tried to explain. Some of it was real, I think, or at least as real as someone can be when they've been caught in something they'd been hoping they'd never have to own up to. He cried at one point, which surprised me. I didn't cry. I'd used up my tears over the previous weeks, and what was left was something steadier. He asked if we could work through it. I said no. He asked if I was sure. I said, "Yes, Fletcher, I'm sure." He left 2 weeks later. Petra handled the property side of things. We came to an agreement about the equity split that reflected my larger down payment contribution, and the unexplained transactions were addressed as part of that negotiation. It wasn't easy. There were a few tense weeks where I wasn't certain how it would resolve. But it did resolve, and I came out of it whole. Not undamaged, but whole. The thing about protecting yourself financially is that people sometimes frame it as a lack of trust. Like, if you really love someone and you really believe in your future together, you don't need a cohabitation agreement or a documented equity split or a separate savings account. You just leap and trust the net. I believed that too for a while, or I wanted to believe it, which is slightly different. Here's what I know now. Protecting yourself is not the opposite of love. It's the opposite of naivety. And there's nothing romantic about naivety. There's nothing romantic about being the safe choice without knowing it. There's nothing romantic about being selected for your stability and your income, and the fact that you had your whole thing sorted, while the person across the breakfast table had a debt you'd never heard of and a version of you in his head that he'd described to his brother like you were a reasonable investment strategy. I moved into a rental in Westboro while the property stuff was being sorted. Small place, 1 bedroom, more than enough. I put a plant on the kitchen windowsill, and I bought myself a good espresso machine with money I'd earned myself. And the first morning I made coffee in that kitchen, I stood there in the quiet and thought, I know exactly what I have. It's been 8 months since that Saturday morning at the kitchen table. I'm not going to say I'm over it. That's not really how it works, and I don't think it would be honest to pretend otherwise. But I'm okay. I'm better than okay on most days. My mother called last week to check in. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was good. She said, "You sound like yourself again." I hadn't realized until she said it how true that was. I sound like myself again. I go to work. I do my job. I come home to my quiet 1 bedroom and my windowsill plant and my good espresso machine. I know what I have, and I know what I'm not willing to let go of again. If you're watching this and you're somewhere in the middle of something like this, not at the beginning, not out the other side yet, but in the part where you're keeping records and talking to lawyers and trying to hold it together while performing normal, I want you to know that the other side exists. It's quieter than you think. In a good way. You'll get there. You know the difference even now. You just have to trust what you heard.